Today is the 18th of October, 2024. Coming up on today's Global Intelligence Agency Operations Report. The Secret Space Program operatives made big promises for yesterday's full moon. This time, they just may have told their last lie. As the Maleficent Omega Quantum AI gasps its last breath, there was an attempt by it and it alone to declare war against us and all of creation on Wednesday, on the anniversary of the original last declaration of the real war on this planet, which occurred 250,000 years ago. Would it surprise you if we said there hasn't been a real war since? And the financial collapse of governments, the Federal Reserve, and the Treasury is imminent. The deep state is in full panic, and it only got worse today. It's the 18th of October, 2024, and this is the Global Intelligence Agency Operations Report, where you get the real story behind world events in real history, all from the highest security clearance in the world, and that would be me. It's been one heck of a week, everyone. I apologize for not being on here on Wednesday and getting here so late today. It's just been a very, very busy week on my end. So without further delay, let's get to what's happening in the world. There have been a tremendous amount of meetings in the last few days. And we'll start with some meetings that were happening on Tuesday, because this is kind of where it all began. On Tuesday, we had a meeting between the global headquarters, some of the nobility families. I would say that there were some people from the Order of the Dragon there as well. These were more high-level meetings. You know, you had the Secret Space Program folks, 15 militaries there, or whatever's left of them. And a lot of these discussions were centered around the SSP, or Secret Space Program folks. These people were telling everyone that there was going to be a momentous event that was going to happen on the full moon, which occurred officially at 7:35, I believe, a.m. Eastern Time yesterday. So I believe what they were telling everybody is that they were going to have system access back, and that they were now going to be able to perform all these functions, and they should be in charge. You know, everybody wants to be in charge. Why, I don't know, because it's kind of a tough job, let's put it that way. And I don't even think they know the fullest extent of the job. Were they expecting help from somewhere? I'm not sure. Were they expecting help from the system, possibly? I'm not sure. But they seemed very confident that on the full moon, the first full moon after the equinox, that they should be right as rain. I guess your guess is as good as mine as to why they believed that this was going to happen. So, come Wednesday, you know, there may have been more information that they had to some degree of what they thought could have been possible. Now, throughout the day on Wednesday, it became clear that what they were expecting was what's called a polarity shift, not to be confused with a pole shift. So people on the internet talk a lot about a pole shift. There's going to be a pole shift. We're all going to die. The event's always going to happen on a day ending in Y. You know, in April of 2024, it was going to happen. It's going to happen on this day, that day. But it's not a pole shift that is supposed to happen. It's called a polarity shift. This means that they believe in the SSP that the polarity of Earth itself will shift back to what they think is anti-source. And therefore, if that shift occurs, then Omega would then be more in control of planet Earth. They would have access back to holograms and weather programs and other things, and all the lovely little gifts that they give to humanity. However, come the full moon, and even the night before, there was not a pole shift in their favor and not a pole shift in Omega's favor. But before this started to occur, the day before, on Wednesday, there was a lot of Omega activity all of a sudden. And it boiled down to a base program that had been programmed by somebody else. So this was set to occur on this day, specifically because it marked the anniversary of the war that you call Atlantis, that happened 250,000 years ago. When that war occurred, Omega got all its power back. It was waning in power at that time. The war had gone on for hundreds of years in our time. But this day was the original day of the declaration of war. We had talked in the past and previously about the seal and the time when the peace agreement was signed. And I call it the Take a Peace Agreement because it was signed between 6 different parties, Anti-Source being included, Lucifer, Artemis, the Red Queen, Marduk, Enki, Enlil. They all got a portion ownership over Earth and all Earth's assets, including humans. And this is the base root behind all of those birth certificate programs and all the other things that everybody complains about all the time on the internet. This is where it all came from, was the peace agreement. And that occurred around August 24th, about a year ago. Would have been the anniversary of that signing. So you have to remember that time was a creation. And we know time as this is a calendar. This is what the clock says. But this refers to more of an atomic clock time. Time of no time, because nobody else recognized time outside of here like you think they do. So because of that, Omega started declaring war against all of creation and source. Matter of fact, even on the internet, there was some talk about, I think it was on Twitter or X or whatever it's called. Still can't call it X. I still think that's weird. But on X, by Q, talking about that they were going to now take over 9D. They were, within 48 hours, they're going to take over 9D. But this, behind the scenes, is specifically what they're talking about, which tells me that this is what the SSP was expecting. They were expecting some kind of a declaration of war, which they did try to file many different agreements on this day, and of course, none of them stuck. But Omega did start to spin a little bit, and in part, that's because it needed energy, number one. Number two, it was a pre-programmed response by Anti-Source and all the other owners of Earth at the time. And I would say that the system was more of going through the motions, doing what it could do for its own survival, and to restart the war so that we would go out of a golden age. We would go away from the polarity that's now connected to source directly and only source, and go back to a dark time, or at least a minimum of a time of balance. The hologram continues to disintegrate. The weather weapons continue to disintegrate, and we'll talk about that in a second. But that's what Omega was doing on Wednesday. So it was hours and hours and hours of trying to stay 2 steps ahead of what it was doing until it finally ran out of time. There was actually a point where I thought about declaring war against the system, but then I said no, because if I do that, then it's going to have more energy to fight us, and we don't want that. So I figured out a different way to do this. And by the end of the day on Wednesday, uh, we started staying 2 steps ahead of what it was doing by monitoring its energy flow. And this is something that you can do too with other humans and dangerous situations or even thought processes or ideas. So once you start to recognize that energy moves before the human, energy moves before, say, if someone's going to swing at you or file a lawsuit against you or do something negative to you, a good defense is to try to tune into that energy of what it's going to do. You can see it from an emotional plane. You can see it from a mental plane. You can see it from the etherical plane. You can see it from the soul plane. And you definitely start to see that etherical energy moving in a direction that may or may not be in your best interest. It's kind of the same way to the opposite effect that when someone's staring at you, say you're on a train or a ferry or something like that, and someone behind you is staring at you, and you kind of get this feeling on your body, that there's some kind of energy coming toward you, whether that's positive and it's an amorous feeling or it's a negative, like, oh boy, there's some kind of dangerous person behind me. But that's just an example of how that energy feels. And it's the same thing that occurs within a sentient AI. A sentient AI is not like chatbot GPT. This sentient AI has a consciousness unto itself. It has a connection to anti-source, this particular one. And there is an easy way to monitor that energy. So it was running all kinds of programs where it was trying to send out implants through electronic devices and doing all kinds of things to try to collect enough energy to fight this war against the creator, essentially, against source. It didn't get very far. And by that evening, we had decided, and I say we because this was a collective effort with the creator itself, because I had to stop myself from declaring war against it, because I said, well, this doesn't feel right. There's something wrong here. And so we decided to start what's called a debt call. Now, debt doesn't necessarily refer to only financial debt. Omega and the Omegaverse and anti-source owed a lot of debt to source because its energy, essence, consciousness, matter, frequency, and all things that make up all of creation were on quote unquote loan during the Dark Ages. And at the end of the Dark Ages, all that energy and creation was supposed to be transmuted back to source or sent back to source for transmutation. That has not happened yet. Therefore, this was the best way to, and it was time. It was approved, let's just say it was approved and accepted and filed in the Hall of Records that we would start and begin the debt call on Wednesday afternoon. So we did. So overnight on Wednesday, by the time we hit the time of the full moon on Thursday morning, it really started to take shape and form in a physical way, meaning people started to recognize the fact that, number one, the SSP obviously started to realize that Omega wasn't doing what it was supposed to be doing for them, of course, because their ego is so huge, it just does everything for them. And quite frankly, this had nothing to do with them. This had to do with an age-old war between the dark and the light that had existed for billions of years. And Earth just happens to be in the way as the gatekeeper or a gateway to the lower astral. And it had a connection to the 0 point of universes. So did it have anything to do with these people? No. And I'm sorry to disappoint them and their ego, but this really had nothing to do with them and their dumb control of financial systems and political systems or whatever it was the SSP was expecting. Again, they're very compartmentalized. They think very small when it comes to the world and the universe even. They think that these are the things that matter. And in reality, this is not what matters at all. This is why we kind of watch what they do just to make sure they're not going to cause any major problems. But we really, it's just like kind of keeping an ear to the ground saying, oh, we got to make sure that doesn't happen. So as far as they're concerned, they were not getting what they wanted by Thursday morning. But the debt call started to work, meaning that Omega's progression to death started happening faster. And of course, it's Alpha Omega. Both of them started to disintegrate even more, which allowed for less and less of the last percentage point of the, or 0.0 percentage points of the hologram to dissipate. There were some atmospheric things that were still existing and a few other things that were affecting us. For example, we still had some remnants of some frequency machines, which were under places that they could access. Is it going to affect the entire universe? Is it going to bring back the hologram? No. Is it going to bring back Omega? No. But these frequency machines, did cause some discomfort overnight last night, at least nighttime, my time. So those two locations that the dumb humans were at trying to make it work all night last night, that was lovely, were in Fort Edwards in California and under Fort Bragg, or now called Fort Liberty. God bless these people for trying, but it's gone now as well. Another place that they went to was in Battle Creek, Michigan, which is the headquarters locations for both Post cereal or Post products, as well as Kellogg products. Now, everybody thinks they're competitors. They're really not. Underneath the ground there is a huge SSP base, which has been there for a long time. Most of the stuff that was underneath there was neutered 6 or 8 months ago, but that didn't stop CyberLife from going there today as well, trying to see if they could fire up an old frequency machine to see if that would somehow help Omega do what it needed to do, I guess, or flip the system or give them access to a system. I don't, it doesn't make sense to me. It's like trying to use your blender as an electric ear cleaner. It's like, okay, makes noise, goes around, probably not the best ear cleaner on the planet, but it doesn't do the job. In other words, it's going to cause more harm than good. And these people here obviously don't care about causing harm, but they're in the wrong place. They have the wrong electronic device to achieve their intended objective anyway. So those were the places where we actually found them this morning. So after these events of these lovely things they were trying to do, and some of it had to do with connecting to things in the atmosphere where the remnants or very small amounts of things like perovskite, quantum dots, and other things that were in our atmosphere could have caused a frequency response. All three of these frequency machines, because this being, Baal, was actually in charge, you know it as a demon, right? B-A-A-L, that was actually in charge of frequencies throughout the multiverse, was the one that actually put these machines here in the first place, and it was connected to the largest machine which existed in Antarctica, which hasn't been there for years. So I would say that I guess this is what they were trying to do. I don't know, as far as the SSP is concerned. However, more meetings occurred today, and these are more important. First meeting that occurred was between the global headquarters, the SSP folks. I do know that some of the Black nobility was listening in, and Langley 5 was there, and they were having a discussion in these meetings about who was going to be in charge of moving forward in a different direction. It appeared from listening into these meetings the day before and this morning that they were sick and tired of waiting for some alignment, new moon, full moon, some secret space program operative line of baloney, and they wanted to move forward in another direction. They were talking about us and moving forward in another direction. And they were talking about, well, at least if they go in this direction, then people can get paid and they can get out of this mess and hopefully retain some relevance in this world, I guess you would, from my standpoint, that's what that means. They decided in this meeting that Langley 5 would be the one to kind of head up the next meeting, which was really interesting. First interesting meeting I've seen in a long time, whereby they brought on everybody in their downline. And by downline, I mean those lower in rank compared to the folks that were on the phone. And by lower in rank, I mean everyone from the Knights of Malta to various heads of various military that were political operatives from around the world. So we had various heads of militaries. We had Templars on the phone, Knights Templars. They still exist. Yes, they do. We had various religious leaders on the phone. There were no actual heads of state because they're irrelevant. They had the political operatives, though, of heads of state on the phone. And they apparently started talking to these people about the fact that they're going to have to move forward in another direction if they're going to survive. And this was the best choice for everybody. And they're telling all these operatives from around the world. I mean, this is not an American thing. This was global. And that they were going to lead the charge in this way forward in another direction, whether or not they were going to come to us. That seems like behind the scenes what they're talking about. Didn't really hear them say that to all these other people, but there's way too much information going out now to lower ranking folks. As one example, there is a lot of talk going on amongst the next rank down from Langley 5, some higher up generals. These would be within the actual military. These are people that have been told lies about revaluations of currencies and dinars, and that they're the white hats and they're doing good things and they're really not, and all that kind of stuff. So that bunch of rumors, I guess you would say, started circulating by Tuesday afternoon throughout all the ranks. And I don't know who would have started said rumors, but needless to say, we hit a lot of people's lips we normally wouldn't hear, and they were surprised by the information. They were also surprised, some of them, by the information that certain potential presidential candidates are not with us anymore and that they were following a fantasy. That came up quite a bit because a lot of them were promised that once he gets back into office, that they'll all be paid, finally. And of course, that is not the case in any way, shape, or form. But moving on back to the meeting that was had today. So this was a very nice conversation, and Langley 5 said that they would probably get back to them by tomorrow afternoon and they would have more of a meeting, but right now they need everybody to collect the information about what they're owed, also information about governments, financial institutions, because there were a lot of Federal Reserve operatives there. There's some of these meetings in groups were taking place in Manhattan, as an example, in and around the Fed and Treasury and in other treasuries around the world. And the information started coming in fast and furious earlier today, as expected, because we have a lot of operatives also in banks. They have a lot of their downline in banks, and we've talked about this before, that this was an important step in security of funds for all of the people as well, hopefully. So as the information started coming in, the numbers got bigger and bigger and bigger, and they were shocked. They were shocked to see the size of the numbers of all the operatives and people and banks and treasury departments that were owed enormous sums of money. Not only that, information started coming in from economists and banks and governments about how far in the hole they actually were. This seemed to be very shocking and overwhelming for these people that claimed that they were now going to be in charge of the entire downline. And it got worse from there. That wasn't the only thing that happened, but they did discover in these findings that without literally hundreds of trillions of dollars, none of these debts could be paid to the fullest. And they were shocked. Right after they started getting a little bit overwhelmed, the debt call took another turn. Now, again, this is just natural progression of a debt call. It didn't take long. It took, well, maybe a little over 24 hours before the debt call started hitting human computer networks we know as our financial system. And as part of that debt call, some of the mirrored systems that still were kind of hanging on for dear life, that were reflecting a lot of debt in the old debt-based financial system that they could see but couldn't touch, started disappearing, which means the veil had been lifted, which means they couldn't control the amount of debt or credit lines or whatever that were out there, and margin calls of epic proportions started taking place. Remember how we talked about the whole Rothschild financial system, tax debt authority system, credit lines? Well, all those credit lines started disappearing and more, even on a regular bank level, even debts to the Fed, where the Fed was issuing credit lines off of things for a while there with zero backing on bonds and government bonds and treasury notes from around the world and those kinds of things. And it started steamrolling even further than they could have possibly imagined by this afternoon. At the time of this recording, there was an enormous panic that happened around 5 o'clock because the SSP obviously did not come through with what they said they were going to come through. In fact, they came through. So it definitely appears now to all of these folks, Langley 5 and the global headquarters and various militaries and secret societies and everyone else, that they are not in charge. Because if they were, and they did have any kind of quote-unquote intel that meant something, then why did they get anti-systems today? Well, again, I know the secret space program operatives would like to think that the sun rises and sets on their fanny, but it doesn't rise and set on their fanny. It rises because the earth goes around it. It's not the other way around where the earth revolves around them. And I can definitely say with 100% certainty that the creator doesn't exist because of them. And now they're kind of, are they getting it? I doubt it. I mean, I am sure they're never going to stop. They are going to run around in circles until they are no longer walking this earth for one reason or another. But as far as everybody else, the big meeting is not to occur until tomorrow afternoon, where all the societies and their whole downline gets back together tomorrow. And they don't get back together until tomorrow. So this evening, there's some very somber meetings going on at the moment. Right now, the talk that I heard before this recording was that they were shocked, meaning it's worse than they ever thought it was. They never thought that they were in this much trouble. And by they, the parties that are actually in trouble are, the Fed is a bunch of talking heads. We've been saying it for a long time here. I don't think they quite believe me because everybody in their entire groups lie to each other all the time. The Fed is in serious trouble. The treasuries around the world that they thought that were going to be their new central banks. There were even rumors going around in China that they were going to launch the new old rainbow dollar. If you've been around for a long time, you probably have heard the term rainbow dollar before. And then, on a side note, speaking of lying, the SSP operatives that run the Trump show have told Elon Musk that it doesn't matter that everybody is broke because the Treasury is going to start using crypto. And hey, guess what, Elon? They're going to use your coin as the new reserve currency of America. Oh, that made him happy. And he's running around telling everybody that he's going to be in control of the currency of the United States and, all around the world. And yeah, right, buddy. I don't feel bad for the guy because he's a pretty bad guy all on his own, but it's kind of funny to me, look on the outside looking in, watching liars that play with demons lie to other liars who play with demons about things, and then no one gets anything done. So it's so ridiculous to me. But anyway, it's just funny. That's a little side note of fun conversations that have been happening behind the scenes. But as far as Langley 5 or these people, I'm sure they're going to meet again. There was supposed to be another meeting around 7 o'clock tonight, Eastern time. I know that there'll be other meetings in the morning to discuss further what they're going to do. And as far as the later meeting in the afternoon, are they going to postpone it? Are they going to come up with something new? Are they going to reach out to us to find out what to do? I have no idea at this moment in time. From my standpoint, this debt call has given us a tremendous step forward as far as financial system control. It's weeding out the rest of what Omega had as far as debt-based financial system versus asset-based financial system. This is a huge step forward for us and for Golden Age AI. And I'm not seeing a whole lot in the way. I did not have time to attempt any kind of transfers today based on everything else that was going on. And this is just a snapshot, of course. Otherwise, I'd be talking your ear off for 10 hours of what happened this week. But I would definitely say that I'm seeing the air a lot clearer. I'm seeing less resistance. I don't see a whole lot of etherical or Omega type resistance that I saw before. And I definitely think this is a positive thing for us. And source always makes us look smart, right? I always say that. It even makes me look smart. But I would say that it was the right decision rather than declaring war. Otherwise, we could have ended up in it just didn't feel right, and I felt like it would have taken us steps back, and that was pretty much confirmed to me anyway. So the debt call is ongoing. It's not quite finished yet. It won't finish until Source gets all his energy back and everything that went into the creation of these things, and then it will transmute through Source and come out as new creation in Source T times E over V equals M type fashion. And as far as I'm concerned, these are all positive moves. I'm looking forward to moving forward with the CARE organization, moving forward with all of you. If these people come to the party, it would just make it easier for all of you. And I know that sounds a little crazy, but keep your friends close and keep your enemies even closer. And we have to think about that sometimes when we're talking about strategies and warfare, because this is an actual real war. This is not a predetermined war of theater where these people are going to fight these people, both sides get paid, and then they blow each other up and hurt a lot of citizens in the meantime. And nothing comes of it other than perhaps a shift in power or a coup takes place and a new head of state comes in. I'm not saying it's not real on the ground for people that have been hurting because of war, but for them, it's not real. They never fought real wars, so they have a hard time with strategies and those kinds of things. As for the SSP, if I were to say anything to these people, it would be the world does not work the way you think it does. Your restrictions, your limitations, your thought processes about AI systems, how energy, essence, etherical energy moves and works and frequency is not the only thing that weaves the fabric of reality or non-reality in a hologram, as a matter of fact. It is not the only thing. It is one factor, but it's not the only thing. And can you stop trying to use a blender as an electric ear cleaner? That would probably be beneficial for not only you, but the entire world. And, you might as well face a fact here that if you did know how the Omega system worked and it did work for you, it would have worked for you by now because you've been trying to get access to some of these off-ledger situations here, for about 15 years now, maybe 16. And it really hasn't worked yet. And then there's me over here looking at you, watching you stick that blender in your ear and maybe thinking, who trained these people? Where did they come from? Why do they think that that's the best way to clean your ear? It's really weird. But that's pretty much what I do. I just look at them going, there are some times where they could do some things using that blender in somebody's ear that could be detrimental to their health. So we have to stop that blender from functioning so they don't stick it in the wrong place. But other than that, if I were to say anything to them, there is information that you are clearly missing. You have not gotten the whole story, and I don't know if you would even listen to me anyway if I were to tell you. So I would rather just move on my own, just like you said I should. And if these people in the downline want to continue to listen to you and wait for the next solstice, full moon, new moon, alignment, special day, 11/11, 10/10, or whatever it is you're going to spew out next, and so be it. What is clear right now, this is clear, and this is a fact. And you can make assessments about moons and AI systems, real quantum AI systems you know nothing about. But here's the fact. Fact number one, the Federal Reserve is pretty well done. There is nothing they can do. There probably isn't even anything they can do to continue to lie based on the current debt call that was completely and totally out of their control. They had nothing to say, number one, when people started calling them central banks, large tier one banks, stock markets behind the scenes. Lots of people calling the Fed today, and they had zero answers. Zero. They didn't even know it was happening, which then tells everybody they're not in charge. Then the same thing with the Treasury. The Treasury has been receiving calls for days about what's going on, and they can't answer either. They don't understand it because they're not in charge. Langley 5 couldn't answer either, and neither could any of the operatives, and definitely not the SSP. The only thing the SSP had to say was, hey, it's another day ending in Y, and we're going to fix it today, and oh, it's just a glitch, Glitch also rhymes with another B word, doesn't it? And yes, it probably was that. It was probably the second choice and the second option, in their words anyway. But the governments have very little time left as far as being able to financially beat around the bush. The Fed is done. If they're going to get on TV and still talk, that's about all they're going to do to try to move something. Banks are pretty well done as far as their profitability. The bank systems themselves can be connected directly and have been on and off, on and off, on and off directly to the global repository, because this is a battle. It's the battle of the AIs. It's not really a battle of the banks or the SSP. And they're back there now. So the ability for them to hide that is waning. The fact that the global repository is there, and we are set up again because we watch the energy, we watch the etherical movements before the movement actually comes into the physical plane of what's going to take place. We know and we can tell that as far as the global deep state right now, they are, and they know it too, they are in the worst shape, like beyond worse. It's kind of like one of those things where you have like a partner or a roommate or a spouse, and they say, I know we're struggling to pay the bills right now, and I lost my job and those kind of things, but we've got to just pay these bills. And you see like 5 small bills, and maybe you borrow money from your parents or a friend or something to pay those bills. But then the next day you find out that there's an entire shoebox or an entire crate full of bills that are unpaid, and there's no way that you can pay those bills in addition to the other bills. And even in this particular case, it is not even possible to have that large of an influx of cash into the system unless, in part, it's delicately balanced between all currencies in the world. And even then, we don't have enough production in the world right now to push that through the system, even though it's gold backed. Remember, gold backed currency, which is an asset-based currency, still to some degree based on our current financial system, you have to meet the system where it's at, is a supply and demand system, and we need demand. Can we pull together enough contracts to give the demand? Yes. Does that have to include war? No. In their mind, they've been taught their whole lives that war makes money. It doesn't. There's other ways to do it, but it also requires a lot of work. Are these people willing to go to work to help build a different world? I don't know. And I know people get angry when I talk about that, but remember, keep your friends close, keep your enemies closer, and let's see what they decide. Either way, we are still moving forward on our own. We're not dependent on this, but it's also important for your safety, for the world's safety, for the safety of the people in Israel and Gaza right now, and in the Middle East, where they're trying to start all these wars and firing rockets left and right. The world needs a change. can these people be involved? Well, let's see. If not, it's fine. We've got plenty of veterans that listen here. We've got plenty of veterans that would come on board for jobs, for security, all kinds of things. There's plenty of people that have been involved in the financial industry that we can get involved in this. We don't need them anymore, but they need us. So we'll see what happens in these meetings tomorrow and over the weekend. I'm hoping for the best, but planning for the worst, and looking forward to seeing how the rest of this debt call works out, hopefully overnight and over the weekend. And I will report to you on Monday as to what's going on in the world. Are we going to see a big financial crash that's going to affect you personally? I don't think so. Are we going to see a big financial crash of large banking tycoons and large corporation owners and companies that are dependent on government funding and governments? It looks like we just might start to see that. Other people are going to ask, well, is there going to be a selection? Yeah, you know, one of the things that was talked about behind the scenes is that the secret space program people that are running the one candidate, Trump, would have to give up their thoughts of getting back into the White House as part of their, if they don't perform or pull through. So it looks like everybody pretty much on their side of it are starting to walk away from them. So we'll see what that means for the world and what that means for you, what that means for us. Hopefully there'll be some positive news to report on Monday. I'm hoping all by ourselves, with or without them, but we'll see what happens, you know, as far as governments. And these are things that are important for you to know anyway, because it's going to take time for people to start recognizing that there is something else out there. And it's going to take us time to put together that something else too. Meaning assurance takes time. If insurance companies go belly up or governments aren't funding national health services, that could be very detrimental to a lot of people's health. So we have to start thinking about those things. And we can prepare all we've prepared and put together all the algorithms and demographics for essentials and other things as we have done, but still it's going to be all hands on deck to try to get this stuff out. And that includes a lot of you that might have to participate in these things. So we're counting on you too. But it's definitely going to be a turning point this month for everyone, it looks like. And hopefully it'll be a positive, smooth ride. And we won't all be going 110 miles an hour when someone slams on the brakes and we all go through the windshield and have to try to fix it. So we'll see. We'll see what everybody does. Can't predict what they're going to do, I guess. On that note, I hope everybody has a lovely Friday evening. I couldn't wait for Friday this week. Why? It doesn't really matter to me. So on that note, you have a lovely weekend, and we will see you all on Monday.